Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. Young people aren't owning businesses, instead choosing to leave them for older Australians, according to new research from CPA Australia. In fact, our business owners are the oldest in Asia Pacific, with a real focus on the 50-plus age group. Gavan Ord is the Senior Manager of Business and Investment Policy for CPA Australia, the country's leading professional accounting body. Gavan, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Thank you for having me.
Now, people might say this is a bad thing, but as a 50-plus person myself, I'm delighted that my generation is entrepreneurial. Is that a fair take?
Well, it's not a bad thing, but the data from our survey shows, and we've been running the survey since 2009, that older business owners are less likely to run businesses that are growing, less likely to be creating jobs, less likely to be using technology, such as e-commerce and social media, less likely to be innovating, and less likely to be exporting.
Gavan, you've just deflated my ego enormously here, but that's a fair point. That's a fair point. So what about younger Australians? Why aren't they as entrepreneurial, perhaps, as the older ones?
Well, that's a really great question, Sean. It's something that we've been thinking about a lot. So we did a follow-up poll with our members on LinkedIn, and from that poll, our members chose three top issues. The first one was just problems in accessing capital to fund starting a business. The second one was work-life balance. And the third one was job security and the uncertainty of actually starting a small business.
I mean, is this new, or have we been heading for this for a while?
It's something, when we look back at the survey data over the last 14 years, it's been the case for that long and probably longer. And it's a real concern to us. Not so much that there's a lot of older Australians running small business. The concern to us is not enough young Australians are coming into small business, starting a small business, buying a small business.
Okay, so is this startups as well as purchasing an ongoing business? Is that what the survey is showing?
That's right. It's not just about startups. It's about purchasing an existing business. It's about starting your own business. So it's across the board that younger Australians are much less likely than people in Asia to start a small business or want to start a small business.
Okay, so what are we missing out on? What's the size of the prize that we're not getting because of this?
The prize is, and when we look at comparable economies to Australia, like, say, Singapore and Hong Kong, they've got many more younger people running small businesses in those markets. What we do see in those markets is more businesses that are growing, more businesses that are innovating, more businesses that are creating jobs. So what are we missing out on? If you look at it from a macroeconomic point of view, economic growth is probably not as high as what it could be. The job creation is not as strong as what it could be. And we're not as innovative or productive as what it could be. And as you know, recently there's been a few reports around about Australia's low productivity growth. And I think part of that is because we're just not getting through those young entrepreneurial people into the small business sector.
Okay, so how do we change that? Is it a role for government?
Yeah, so how do we change it? That's something we've been thinking about as well. And we didn't have any one answer. I don't think there's a silver bullet. What we're asking for is the government to start a public inquiry to look at that issue and to consider, firstly, why aren't younger people going into small business in the numbers that they should? So what are the barriers to investing and starting a business? And once we have identified those barriers, we're in a better position to start to look at potential solutions, whether that's government policy or existing business owners and what they can do to bring in more younger people into their business.
Is there a cultural element in this? Mind you, if you're saying compared to Singapore and Hong Kong, I mean, I would have thought Singaporeans as a group were probably more conservative. That might be unfair, really, to say that. But is it a cultural element in that people just don't want to take the risk?
Look, that's something I've been looking at myself. And what we do find when we talk to members, and we've got members all over Asia as well as Australia, is there definitely is a cultural element that Going to business is seen as a normal career option in many parts of Asia. And it's just not something that people in university and high school talk about. They talk about, I'm going to go off and work for a large corporate. I'm going to go off and work for government. We rarely hear people talk about going off and starting their own business. But when I go to Asia and when I talk to members in Asia, starting a business is something very much culturally embedded in many parts of Asia. And I think part of that is being a business person is seen as a pathway to success. Whereas in Australia, I don't think that element of running a business and success is as strongly held as it is in Asia.
Stay with me, Gavin. We'll be back in a minute. My guest this morning is Gavan Ord from CPA Australia. Okay, now one of the statistics from your survey is about the low level of digital capability. And I would have thought digital capability was just, it's fundamental, table stakes to any business nowadays. How big a problem is that?
We would start off by saying many Australian businesses use accounting software. So there's very high levels of uptake of certain technologies.
Yep.
But primarily we find that they're doing that for compliance reasons. They have their accounting software to help them with their payroll, to help them with their quarterly BAS. That's the first step, but they're not making the next step. And that the next step is around e-commerce. It's about social media. It's about new payment technologies. So they do have their computers, they do have their point of sale equipment, but they're not making that next step up in comparison to many businesses in Asia. Now, while this is coming across as quite a negative sort of response, what I will say, though, is that over the last few years in Australia, there has been an uptick in small businesses selling online, small businesses using social media. So there have been improvements, but when we draw the comparison to the other 10 markets, we look at Australia is still at the bottom on both of those measures of online sales and social media.
What about around cyber risk, cyber security?
So because of the low uptake of technology, it's not really surprising that Australian small businesses are not as worried about cyber risks as they are in Asia. So the expectations around being cyber attacked in Australia is lower than the survey average. But on the positive side is even though Australian small businesses are not necessarily thinking they'll be cyber attacked, they're pretty good at actually checking their cyber security. So I think there's a positive there that they do understand the risks. And we do know over the last 6 months in particular, after some of the large hacks that have happened recently, that I think cybersecurity and data governance is front of mind for many people and many businesses, small as well.
Okay. What about things like the survey talks about social media and how many small businesses don't use social media? I mean, it's almost a third, which surprised me somewhat in 2023 that social media isn't front and centre more.
And we ask, do you use social media for recruiting? Do you use social media to sell? So it's not just using social media for promotion. But when we do talk to businesses that have said, oh, we don't use social media, we ask them why not. And they said, well, I use social media to talk to my grandkids. I use social media to talk to my kids. It's not something they necessarily understand how to apply it in their business. And I think that's maybe where there's an opportunity for more information around how can you use social media in your business to engage with your customers, to engage with your potential customers, and look at it more broadly than just as something they can use personally.
As a media organisation, we tend to focus on some of these negatives, but there's some positives out of the survey too. And the one I really liked is that almost half of small businesses grew last year. That's got to be good news for the economy and also for encouraging people of all ages to get involved.
Yeah, there's definitely positives. And this year was the best year for Australian small businesses in 5 years. So for us, that was a good result. And while the results show that 2023 this year will be maybe somewhat more positive, So I think there's definitely some positive elements. As I said before, there's been a bit of an uptick in use of social media, in use of online sales, and they're the building blocks of future growth. So there's definitely some positives in there. And if you are looking into business, if you are looking to start your own business, I'd encourage you to have a look at the survey results. There is a lot of survey data there, but what it does show is what are the characteristics of high growth businesses. So if you're running a business or looking to start a business, it gives you a pretty good insight into what you need to look at if you aspire to run a high growth business.
You have to give us a little insight into that one now, Gavin. What is it? What should we be aspiring to be doing?
Well, the survey data says you should be selling online. You should be focusing on customer satisfaction. You should be looking to improve your business management, innovating, and looking at exporting. So I think they're sort of the 5 or 6 key factors which really distinguish a high growth business from other businesses.
Fantastic. Gavin, thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
Thank you, Sean.
That was Gavan Ord, Senior Manager of Business and Investment Policy for CPA Australia. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.